Uh, Today I'm going to discuss with you global monetary systems. The global monetary system, in the sense, when it comes to international trade operations, we all know the international trade are governed by uh, various global organizations. So, right, mm, right. Uh, International trade is governed by various uh, global organizations. Uh, Likewise, I mean, in international, if we take only the international trade is mostly governed by UCP, URC, we know, ISP, then URDG, and all those things we know, right? Those are uh, governed, those regulations are governed by International Chamber of Commerce, ICC, right? Likewise, there are certain other organizations who control the international trade operations throughout the world. So today we are going to discuss some of those systems uh, which are very important in day-to-day international trade operations. Uh, Actually, this part is more or less important to a country. The country's perception, yes, right? More than the individual perception, it's a country perception. How these international organizations are helping our international trade businesses, right? To start with, uh, first we have to see the evolution of this organization. In international trade, when you talk about international trade, uh, we have to talk about two main incidents happen in the world. There is one is World War One, First World War, right? World War was uh, that happened in. Can somebody tell me when was the First World War? From which year to which year? Hmm? Which year to which year? From 1916 to 1918, 3 years. Then came the Second World War. Second World War. That is from that is from when?
1939 to 1945.
Very good. 1939 to 1945. At least one person knows about the world history. What's your name, Buddha?
I'm Prashant,
What's
sir.
Prashant?
Prashant. Yes, sir.
Prashant. Okay. Uh, Prashant was perfect. 1939 to 1945. 1945, after the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing, the Japanese had to stop the war, right? So after 1945, then the 46, 47, the world has seen after the Second World War, entire world was in shambles. The entire uh, economies in different countries were in shambles because I don't know whether you have heard during the war. It says maybe exaggerated, but it's true. uh, the German guys, if they want to buy a loaf of bread, they had to take the money in a wheelbarrow. So that expensive, a loaf of bread, they had to take the money in a wheelbarrow, right? So then after the war, everybody wanted to have their own way. They wanted to build up their nation. They want to build up their economy, right? So everybody were trying their best to level best to how to bring their economies to a sustainable situation. So then only, what is the best solution the people are having if you want to improve your economy, a country's economy? Please join. These are discussions. These areas we'll try to discuss. Then you don't have to worry about reading it again and again. If the balance of payment of a country, if you want to improve it, what's a basic method? What is the basic method? Bankers, it's a shame. It's a shame.
Trade transactions.
Huh?
Dealing in trade.
Pardon?
Dealing in trade transactions.
Yeah, dealing in trade transaction. The trade, what we have to do in a country's trade?
Increase the
Huh?
export. Increase the export.
And increase the exports. Correct. Okay, fine. The other one? Other one
Reduce the
is
imports. Reducing imports.
reducing imports. The opposite of increasing exports, reducing imports. So if a country can increase their exports, then they will be getting money, foreign exchange from other countries. And if they can reduce the imports, then they don't have to pay a lot of money going out of the country for imports. Isn't it? Right? So the basic principle in balance of payment is simple as that. Right? I'm not going into uh, macroeconomics. I'm just saying a simple method. Right? So if you want to increase the exports and decrease the imports, what is the best method you can implement? Best method or best methods you can implement. Hmm? How can you discourage imports?
Try to produce within the country goods. Try
Try
to
to
produce
produce within
goods
the
within the
country.
country.
Then if you are not importing, if you are not exporting, then there's no international trade happening. It's a domestic trade. So that's a different question. I am asking in international trade. Right? කොච්චරවත් self sufficiency එකක් එන්නේ නැහැ නේ countries වල. අපි ඒක දන්නවනේ. ඒක බොරුවක්. Right? 100% self sufficient නැහැ. But what you said was correct. So what can we do? What can we do? When we are going to how can we reduce the imports?
Increasing taxes.
Increasing import taxes.
Yes, sir.
Correct. You're correct. Right? What you have to do is to impose taxes on impose taxes on imports. Impose taxes on imports. Then definitely over a period of time, people will reduce their purchasing of those particular items, right? Or some other restrictions. Now, in Sri Lanka, that is what is happening at the moment because of the COVID-19 and all. Our economy, we were in a very tight situation, especially we don't have a parliament. You can't pass the resolutions or pass any budgets, no allocation of funds. So we are in a real tricky situation. So we are now trying our best to reduce the imports, because otherwise what is going to happen is one fine day all our foreign reserves will be vanish, isn't it? Right? So we are trying to reduce it as much as possible. So when we are trying to impose taxes and try to reduce or impose any embargoes, what's happened to the countries who are manufacturing those items, or whatever to the countries that are manufacturing those items for export purposes? For their sales, what is good? What is the impact on their sales? What is the impact on their sales? The exporter side, not our country. Our country is importing from another country. So the exporter is in those countries. So if you are going to impose taxes, heavy taxes and tariff on certain imports, what is going to happen to those exporters? Tell me. Those guys will get affected, isn't it? Huh? Those exporters will get affected because they are manufacturing, but they can't sell it because there's no demand in other countries because of the high prices. Whenever it goes to that country, they impose high taxes on the imports and high taxes when they are selling the goods. So it is not viable for them to manufacture. So after the World War, Second World War, what had happened was everybody were trying to safeguard their national economies. Everybody was trying to safeguard their national economies. Because of that, every country started imposing taxes, increasing import taxes, right? And then they were trying to encourage their exports, but on the other hand, they were imposing taxes on their imports. So because of that, the world trade came into a standstill because goods are not moving from one country to the other because of the price and the taxes, right? Make a ඔලුවට ගන්න නිකන් ස්ටෝරියක් වගේ. ඉතින් අන්තිමට ඔක්කොම කට්ටිය එකට හිර වෙලා දැගෙනවා. Then only to overcome this issue, the GATT was set up. GATT, General Agreement on Tariff and Trade. General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, GATT. The So to overcome this issue, they there was a discussion among top ranked countries, right? UK, USA, Germany, France, like that. And then they formed this organization called GATT, General Agreement on Tariff and Trade. Now, GATT was set up in 1948. It was set up, it was initiated to standardize import tariff and technical standard requirement with a view to encourage economic growth through world trade. Right? It was initiated to standardize the import tariff. So if, for example, if there's a commodity, if you say rice, commodity rice, the China is exporting rice. China is exporting rice. The exporter, China. The importers, you say, three countries, UK, USA, Germany. So all these three countries, they started imposing taxes on rice imports, right? For example, if you say UK, they impose tax of 15%, USA 18%, Germany 16%, like that. If you see, right? It's a big tax. So when you impose tax like that, so every ton of rice which is imported to UK, they have to pay 15% extra taxes. So the prices will definitely go up. So people will reduce consumption of rice. Right? 15 is very madi. Down 25, 28, and 26 again. Big taxes. Right? So the final GATT round, known as the Uruguay round, began in 1986 and was successfully completed in 1995. Now, after they initiated the GATT, General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, that every 5 years, they used to have a round of discussions with the member countries. So those discussions were called rounds. Those discussions were called rounds, right? There were so many rounds, Tokyo rounds, right? USA rounds. Then like that, the final round was Uruguay round. Uruguay round. It was started in 1986 and it went on discussing about the pros and cons of GATT, General Agreement on Tariff and Trade. And ultimately, they have decided to disband this organization, GATT. That was in 1995. From 1948 to 1995, this organization was there. Right? GATT was there. And then in 1995, after the Uruguay round, we call it the Uruguay, the place was Marrakesh. Right? The GATT was went into dormant, and a new organization came up, that is WTO. What is WTO? Can somebody give me the
World Trade
full
Organization.
name for that abbreviation?
World Trade Organization.
Yeah, World Trade Organization. World Trade Organization was introduced in 1995, and they have stopped GATT. So actually, the World Trade Organization has born from GATT. Okay. And if we talk about the history of GATT, 1947, the GATT is drawn to record the results of negotiation between 23 countries, right? In force on January 1st, 1948. 1950, the 1949 to 1956, first 4 rounds on tariff negotiation. Then people have started negotiating with other countries. They said, okay, all the member countries, you are within this group. Whoever within this group, worldwide, everywhere, if you are importing rice, the taxes should be 4% everywhere. Whether it's UK or USA or Germany or France or Sri Lanka, that's a price you have to, that's a tariff you have to apply. They have standardized thing. It is clear? Right. 1949 to 56, first 4 rounds on tariff negotiations. Earlier we had quick rounds, but later it was dragged. In 1957, creation of the EEC. What is EEC? EEC, සාමාන්‍ය දැනුම නම් මදි.
European Economic Community.
Council, European Economic Council, right? Good. Then 1962, derogations to the GATT rules in the areas of cotton and fiber were negotiated, later to evolve in the multi-fiber agreement. Then 1964 to 67, Kennedy round. 1964 to 67, that round was Kennedy round. Kennedy round කියනකොට අපිට සිතාගන්න පුළුවන් මොන රටේ තියන්න නැත්තේ. මොන රටේද මේක තියන්න නැත්තේ. මීටින් එක. Kennedy රට මොකද්ද?
USA.
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 USA. And that during that round, UNCTAD, important name, UNCTAD, UNCTAD, UNCTAD was created. This name UNCTAD was important to us because nothing else. Only Secretary General to some organization, international organization, only Sri Lankan Secretary General for any organization. We had the pride of appointing one of our eminent economists into this forum to head the organization as a Secretary General. Can somebody tell me the name? Who was the UNCTAD General Secretary? Secretary General. I heard that this time Honorable Ranil Wickremesinghe is trying to contest for UN Secretary General, right?
Could it be Kadiragama?
No. Have you ever heard of a person called Dr. Gamini Korea? He's dead and gone. Dr. Gamini Korea. His nephew was, his nephew is Tamil, his nephew is Lalit Kutalawala. Lalit Kutalawala's uncle. Right? Yeah, make a Secretary General. One of the eminent economists we have produced. Then 73 to 79, it was Tokyo round. Tokyo round, the multi-fiber agreement negotiated in 1974 to restrict export growth and extended several times thereafter. 86-94 Uruguay round negotiations. Then this went on 86 to 94 for more than 8 years. These negotiations went on. Because by that time, from 1948 to 1995, 1995 is your era. 1948 was even before my era, right? We have not born in 1948. I don't think anybody in my class is that told, right? Even I am not told like 1940s, right? 1995 නම් ඔක්කොම ඔය මේ ක්ලාස් එකකින් ඔක්කොම 1995 ට කලින් ඒ කට්ටිය or close to that range තමයි ඔයගොල්ලෝ ඉන්නේ. ඒතර මේ ගොඩක් ඒවා මතක තියෙන්න ඕන. 1994 වෙනකොට most of the issues regarding the trade tariff were resolved. Now countries were trying to have their own way of doing it. So they said, we don't want any more controls. Let us allow to work freely, right? So because of that, we don't want this damn GATT anymore. You give a stop to that. And then the Marrakesh Protocol was signed, establishing the creation of the World Trade Organization, right? Now we'll see. The next one is the World Trade Organization. Any questions on GATT? Right. World Trade Organization was created from GATT, right? And these are some examples of easy charts. 1945 it was created. By 1955, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 rounds were held. ඒක මං note එකේ තියනවා දීලා. ඊට පස්සේ Diran round, Kennedy round, Tokyo round, Uruguay round වලින් අපි මේක මෙතනින් දාත්වා. මේ මෙතන තියෙන්නේ number of countries at start for 23, මට මතක විදිහට 23 countries and ended up with 100 odd countries. Ended up with 100 odd countries. In GATT, during GATT period, a lot of countries between them, they had this agreement, trade agreements. We call those trade agreements bilateral trade agreements. ඔයගොල්ලෝ පේනව නේද මේ බෝඩ් එක? පේනවද ඇහෙනවද?
Peno, sir.
පේනවා ඇහෙනවා. මම හිතන්නේ මේ හවස් වරුවේ ට්‍රැෆික් එක අඩු හරි මොනවා හරි එක දැන් අපිට හවස අපිට ඉෂුස් ආවේ නැහැ. උදේට සෑහෙන දේ මට my 2-hour class again 45 minutes I lost. Right? This is bilateral. During that, most of the agreements are bilateral. Bilateral agreement. Lay. What do you mean by bilateral agreements? And the other one is multilateral. Other one is multilateral. Right? What is bilateral and what is multilateral?
Bilateral is between two countries,
Bilateral is between two countries. Multilateral is
many countries.
among many countries. Right? Among many countries. Now, can you give me one of the bilateral agreements, famous bilateral agreements we are having or we had initially in 1950s? There were famous bilateral agreements which we have signed. 1953, 54, 55, 56, and famous bilateral agreements. With whom? One is Sri Lanka, China, Ceylon. Those days it was Ceylon, China, Ceylon. China, Ceylon bilateral agreement on importing of rice. Right? How we had to do it. Then we had Korea, South Korea, Ceylon. That was another famous one for what is the commodity? What's a commodity? Rubber. We were exporting rubber and we were importing a lot of items from Korea. Right? So it was like that. China, Ceylon is the opposite of it. China was exporting rice to us. Right? But when it comes to WTO, that was multilateral agreements between few countries. Can you give me some examples for multilateral agreement?
SAFTA,
Huh?
SAFTA agreement.
SAFTA agreement, very good. How? SAC. SAC is famous again. All the SAC countries, they got together and signed. Samanatine. SAFTA, NAFTA, ඔය ඔක්කොම එක agreements තියෙනවා. Right? Multilateralism is a coordination mechanism for achieving mutually beneficial trade outcomes. Right. Now, the World Trade Organization, just a few overview. International organization begins to operate on January 1st, 1995. Right? Membership is approximately 162 countries as at November 2015. After that, I couldn't get the exact figures. Whatever the possible one, the latest was I got was 162 countries as at November 2015. Secretariat is situated in Geneva. Secretariat, WTO, World Trade Organization Secretariat is situated in Geneva with a 625 staff. The 625 staff, right? Functions of WTO is administering and implementing the multilateral trade agreements. At present, 16 different multilateral agreements in WTO. So, when we are talking about multilateral agreements, if you have been asked to write a short note or something, then you have to mention these facts, right? At present, we are having about 100 and 162 countries, right? And the head office is in Geneva. Right. Then, Forum for Multilateral Trade Negotiations. Forum for Multilateral Trade Negotiations. If the countries want to sit and discuss about multilateral trade agreements, these people will support it, and WTO local officers will give their fullest cooperation to this, right? Then Forum for Multilateral Trade Negotiations, that we need. Dispute settlement, right? Then next one is technical assistance and training for developing countries. The final one, cooperation with IMF and World Bank. They are also the funding arms, so they all are cooperating with each other. Okay? තේරුණාද ඔයගලන්ට මේ ටික? තේරුණාද?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
WTO basic principles, trade without discrimination. Then discrimination එක ආවේ කොහෙන්ද? 1948 වලදී, after the World War, when the people were trying to do their business on their own, when they were trying to enhance their budget, right? Meet the targets and all, that's a different thing. Right? Then, number 2, predictable and growing access to market. Predictable and growing access to market. You should be ready. I mean, whenever there's a need, you should be ready to predict the economy of such countries and how can you access the market. Undistorted fair competition. Undistorted fair competition. Very important. And no bias. It should be fair competition and transparency. Right. Then we have to discuss about another organization. That is how this International Monetary Fund, IMF, International Monetary Fund was created. We have discussed about GATT, then we have discussed about World Trade Organization. Correct? Kumar? Hello? Another?
No,
No,
sir.
sir.
North landing level. That's the Anamada, I think. Right. Then we said 1948, and one organization started, that is organization again. Is it World Trade Center or
Got.
huh?
Got.
GATT? Right. Then along with that, there was some other discussions among countries, the big countries, right? And they were just thinking not only the tariff, then how can we fix the price of a currency? How can we fix the price of a currency in a country? So because when that discussion came, during that time, 1940, the latter part of 1940s, is 46, 40, 45, 46, there were certain discussions, and the people were deciding, okay, how much you can deposit in gold in a reserve. There were gold reserves. Gold reserves. Right? How much you can deposit, a country can deposit gold in a particular place, maybe with US, UK, and then based on how much of gold you are having, that was your wealth. So if it is a wealthy country, the exchange rates are strong, right? If it's a poor country, then we don't have enough gold to play in the market, right? So they had to think about a way of coming out. Then only the Bretton Woods system was started from 1944 to 1971. So these discussions went on, and finally it was agreed at the Bretton Woods, okay, we have to form a new organization who can govern and control our exchange rates also. Forget about what do you call this? GATT has in the not GATT. The gold standard was there, but gold standard across the board, I mean, it was not a very good product. So that's why they wanted to have a special organization to control the exchange control issues in different countries, right? But that only the Bretton Woods conference was held in 1944, and then in 1945, the new organization called IMF, International Monetary Fund, was created, right? It was created. Then the floating exchange rate was there up to 1973 onwards. After that, we see what had happened. So, international financial systems, the history, when you talk about the history, one is the gold standard, its currency value were fixed in terms of quantity of goods. Right? Number two is Bretton Woods system. Number three, floating exchange rates. Okay. Okay, IMF. International financial systems. International Monetary Fund, IMF, formed in 1945 and commenced operation in March 1946. Right? International Monetary Fund, IMF, was formed in 1945. Right? And commenced operations in March 1947. The World Bank, IBRD, began operations in June 1946. World Bank. Regular Patangata 46 regular Thapadak Takuna. Some companies, private sector, in March 1946. Were the outcome of international conference of 44 nations held at Bretton Woods in 1944 to plan the post-war monetary system. Here we are controlling about monetary systems, right? So initially, when IMF was started, it was with how many members? How many members?
29.
29? The 44 there. Sorry. Starting with 29 members. Starting with 29 members. Right. International Monetary Fund, formally formed in 27 December 1945. Headquarters, Washington, D.C., USA. Membership, 29 countries founding and 188 countries to date. Right? So you can see the improvement in IMF. Benefits. IMF promotes international monetary cooperation and exchange rate stability. Right? Then facilitate the balance growth of international trade. Facilitate the balance growth of international trade. Next one, provide resources to help members in balance of payment difficulties. Provide resources to help members in balance of payment difficulties. Final one, to assist member countries to achieve microeconomic stability and reduce poverty. Right? So those are the benefits of IMF. Now, there are criticism on IMF also. There are so many criticism. One famous criticism is IMF is out of touch with local economic conditions. Out of touch with local economic conditions. Therefore, the cultures and environment in the countries that they require policy reform. for being out of touch with local economic conditions. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? For being out of touch with local economic conditions, cultures, and environment in the countries that are requiring policy reforms. Then another criticism in IMF programs are only designed to address the poor governance. Excessive government spending and excessive government intervention in the market, they don't bother, right? මේක ඇත්ත හැබැයි මම කියන එක criticism. ගොඩක් වෙලාට දැන් අපේ වගේ countries වල central banking දෙන එක අපි අරගෙන නිකන් ඉන්නවා. අපි මේක හොයලා බලන්නේ නැහැ. right? සමහරවිට බැලුවහම මේගොල්ලෝ අඩු කරනවා. ඒ වගේ instances තියෙනවා. Now the World Bank. තව එකක්. අපි දැන් කීයක් ඉගෙන ගත්තද? මොකද? කීයක් ඉගෙන ගත්තද? කොහේකට උත්තර?
3. Three name, sir.
Huh?
Tuna.
තුනක් ඉගෙන ගත්තා. What are they?
GATT,
GATT,
WTO,
WTO,
and IMF.
and
IMF.
right? So now we'll see what is this World Bank, the World Bank. The World Bank is an international financial institution that provides loans to developing countries for capital programs. දැන් එනවා World Bank එක. World Bank එක අපි අහලා තියෙනවා. අපි කතා අපි ඔයගලන්ට මේ ඔයගලන්ගේ කාලේදී නතුරු කන්ටේන්මන්ට් වචන. World Bank එකේ ඔක්කොම World Bank එකේ එනකන් අපි මේ අපේ එක සහෝදරයෙක් මේ ගිය පාර සම්දාස්වල කිව්වා ඒ පාරත් එයා එකම කියනවා මට ගහනවා. අපි ආවනම් මේ World Bank එකේ සතු කපලා විලංගු දාලා තියාගන්නවා කියලා. මේ ඉතින් ඒ ඔක්කොම බුරු කතාවල් තමයි. The World Bank is an international financial institution that provides loans to developing countries for capital programs. Right? This World Bank comprises of two hands. One is Reconstruction and Development, IBRD. World Bank පේනවද ඔකන්ට? පේනවද නැද්ද?
Payno, sir.
World Bank ඉගෙන ගන්නවා. දැන් IBRD. IBRD කියන්නේ
International Bank for Reconstruction and Development.
International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IBRD. And the other bank is International Development Association, IDA. International Development Association. Right? World Bank was established in 1944. Location, Washington, D.C., USA. Membership, 188 countries, IBRD, and 172 countries, IDA. Right? The World Bank World Bank වලට අපිට අමතක වෙන්නේ නැති එක හේතුවක් කියන බලන්න. World Bank එකේම සිටුේට් 2001 වල නේද 9/11 attack එක වදුනේ 9/11 attack එක 2001 වල right එතකොට World Bank building නේම ගොඩක් ඒවා damage වෙලා ගියා. මේකට ඕන කරලා තිබුණේ World Bank building එකකට ගහලා දාන්න. So making membership IBRD is at the moment we have 188 countries as members and IDA 172 countries as members. When we talk about the history from 1944 to 1968, reconstruction and development loans provided by World Bank were relatively small. Right? During that period, reconstruction and development loans provided by World Bank were relatively small. The 1968 to 1980, the size and number of loans are greatly increased. Right? 1980 to 89, bank emphasized lending to service third world debts. In 1980, third world debts were servicing it was time 1989 to present, banks started lending to environmental groups and NGOs, which prompted criticism. What is happening here? The last from 1989 to present, banks started lending to environmental groups and NGOs. That was always, if you are having a thing like this, then definitely you are going to have issues, right? Now making them go there in a 1989 to present, the NGO and the environmental groups, have you come across any accounts? Right? Are there any people from NDB Bank? NDB Bank? No. National Development Bank? When I was there, I can remember they had about more than 60, 70 NGO accounts. And hardly when you monitor and I started monitoring and what do you mean by restructuring one department, right? And then only these figures came. There were about more than 60 to 70 NGOs opened, right? And all those things were funded by World Bank. And most of the funds of those NGOs and environmental groups have gone to tigers. That's movement Prabhakaran's movement Iram. Right? Iram movement it was say at that time Gotabe was the Defense Secretary. I can remember. He gave strict instructions to the banks also. You have to verify the authenticity of those accounts. whether you are having money or it's purely dormant or whatever, right? ඒක criticism එකක් වුණා මේ World Bank එකට. ඒගොල්ලෝ through NGOs they are funding for some other motives කියලා. IMF and World Bank, IBRD කියන්නේ World Bank එකට, right? කියලා තව නමක්. IBRD or World Bank versus IMF, right? The මේ comparison එක කරලා බලන්න. මම කියන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. ඔයාලා මම කියපු උදේ බලන්න. ඔයාලා බලන්න උදේ comparison එක. The comparison again. Right? Purpose of the IMF is a monetary institution. IBRD, or in other words, World Bank, is a development institution. Activities: IMF stabilizing international monetary system and financing of temporary balance of payment deficits. IBRD is promoting economic growth and development in developing countries. Actually, World Bank is for developing countries, not for developed banks or developed countries. Source of funds: official reserves and countries' currencies, special drawing rights. Gold එක වගේම තමයි අපි තියලා අපි ගන්න special drawing rights. Then IBRD, capital codes issues in international bond market, right? Eligible borrowers, all members, and IBRD only developing countries, only the developing countries. So we comes under IBRD. Outlook is a short term, but World Bank loans are long term. Ours is majority in term, right? Credit horizon: IMF, all IMF loans has to be settled 3 to 5 year maximum, right? IBRD 15 to 20 years credit horizon and the maximum 50 years. Right. Then comes International Finance Corporation. International Finance Corporation. IFC. What is IFC? ඔගොල්ලෝ අහලා තියෙනවද IFC කියලා? කවුරු ඉන්නවද commercial bank? මොකද කවුරු කරන්නේ නැතේ බලන්න. ඔයගොල්ලන්ට ඇහෙනවද මාව? ඇහෙන්නද දන්නේ නැහැ.
I know, sir.
මට ඇහෙනවද මම උත්තරයක් යනකම් ඉන්නේ.
ඇහෙනවා sir.
අහනවා. ඉතින් මම දැන් ඇහුවම උත්තර කියන්න. මොකද මේක every 2 minutes 3 minutes නවතිනවා. මේ නවතන ඉඳ මම බලන් ඉන්නේ. මම උදේවරු ඇති වෙනකන් කතා කළා blank audience එකකට. audience එකක් නැහැ. අපි ඔහේ කතා මම විතර නෙමෙයි ඔක්කොම සර්ලා ටික. හරි දැන් ඒක ඇති වෙලා තින්නේ. ඒ බලනකොට කවුරුත් නැහැ. මම සෙල්සල් නවත්තලා අහන්නේ ඒකයි. මම ඇහෙනවද? නැත්තම් ඉතින් වැඩක් නැහැ. Right? So there are some disturbances. From morning we are having this. Right? So මම බොරුට කතා කරලා වැඩක් නැහැ. What is international finance operation? IFC. මේක හරි common මේ ලංකාවේ. ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ banks ගොඩක් ඒවට ඉන්නවා. NDB, are there any people? NDB, Sampath? කවුරුත් නාම බැංකර්ස්ලා නෙමෙයිනේ ඔයගොල්ලෝ. all සම්පූර්ණ සංගම් වල කට්ටිය ඉන්නේ මම දන්නේ. මුගේ ළමයි ටික. not bankers. right? ඔය එක්කෙනෙක් කියන්න බන්න මොනවාද බැංකුව ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ?
NTB.
හා?
NTV ඉන්නවා, sir.
NT
Sir,
I think Deutsche.
දෙයක්.
I think Deutsche ඉන්නවද කොහෙද?
ආයිස් වෙන වෙන
Deutsche
කොහෙද?
හිටියා දැන් නෑ.
හා?
ඉන්න ඩොයිස් ඉන්න.
බන්?
cousin.
ඉසුරු ඉසුරු ඩොයිස් බැංක්
Ah,
ඉන්නවා.
ඉසුර.
ඔන්න පුතේ කවුරු එක්කෙනෙක් මේ ලීඩ් කරලා නෙගොෂিয়েට් කරලා බලන්න මේ ගෑනු ළමයි ටික කතා කරලාද කියලා. හ්ම්? වෙන මොනවද බැංකුව තියෙන්නේ? ඔයගොල්ලෝ වැඩ කරන ඒවා. ඔක්කොම ඉන්නේ NTB විතරද? දැන් මට ඉන්නවා 20ක්ද 25ක්ද? ඒකෙන් ඔක්කොම ඉන්නේ NTB කට්ටිය විතරද? වෙන්න බෑනේ. NTB ක ස්ටාෆ් එකකුත් නැහැ.
5 people from NTB, sir.
NDB.
NTB. 5 people from NTB.
5 people from NTB. Yeah, that I know. අනිත පහට වැඩි ගොඩක් ඉන්නවා අපි මෙතන. Lot of banks were getting these IFC loans, right? International Finance Corporation. That's the lending arm of the World Bank. That's for private companies. Normally, the World Bank gives loans. The World Bank gives loans to the government sector. They give loans to the government sector, not to the private sector. But this is the private sector. Okay? So they provide loans to these private sector investors, like all your banks, even in DB, Sampath, for example, Cargill Bank. When the Cargill Bank was first initiated in 2012, I can remember when I was there from the day one. I can remember IFC came forward and they said, it is your bank is backed by Cargill group of companies, and it's a sound group of companies. So we are prepared to help. So they came and they asked for 10% shares. They asked for 10% shares. So we were also looking for shareholders, and immediately they bought 10%. When IFC purchased 10% of Cargill shares, Central Bank saw that, and immediately they said, our EPF is governed by Central Bank of Sri Lanka. They said, even we want 10%. Even we want 10%. You know what? After 10%, then there. Then after fully subscribe ka liver, right? Fully subscribe liver, right? So they were insisting. We also wanted 10% because they knew that if IFC is joining, if IFC is prepared to join, right, invest in Cargill Bank, then there's a sound backing. So because of that, they said, we also want. අන්තිමට වුණේ මොකද්ද? IFC කිව්වා ඉතින් ඔච්චර රන් වෙන්න ඕනේ නැහැ. මෙන්න මගේ 10% shares ඔයගොල්ලෝ තියාගන්න. කියලා EPF එකට දුන්නා. දීලා they withdrew. Right? Maybe some of the wise decisions. එම කලා එම හිටියනම් IFC කෙහෙර වෙන්නත් උනා. නමුත් කොහොම හරි they withdrew. Then EPF got the shares, right? 10% shares. And I think එකමදේ 2012 ඉඳන් මේ වෙනකන් අපිට තාම අපේ shares තියෙනවා no return, right? So IFC won by withdrawing and EPF got stranded. Yeah, right? Then after that, IFC, they went on investing money on Cargill's group of companies, right? Not a bank, right? Private sector. Here a lot of areas they see what are the viable organizations and they are prepared to fund it to get the maximum return, right? So it's a funding arm of World Bank to private investors, private sector. World Bank is funding only to the government sector. They affiliated to the World Bank, IBRD, established in 1956 to promote private capital flows to developing countries. Again, developing countries, right? They are not funding for developed countries. Invest directly in private companies, provides loans or guarantees to private investors. IFC borrows from IBRD. They borrow from World Bank and then do the investments, right? And the other one, IDA, International Development Association, that's also affiliated to IBRD, right? World Bank, one is IBRD, other one is IDA, established in 1960, specializes in loans in most needy countries at low or zero interest rates for term longer than 50 years. IDA, majority of their funding, they do it for what do you call this? African countries, Latin American countries, right? Underdeveloped countries, they help and they give loans for longer years, 50 years they now loans ticket, right? එතකොට 50 years විතර loans දුන්නාට පස්සේ either interest free or low interest, right? සුඟක් කියලාට දෙන්නේ less than 1% interest rate, almost zero, and for longer period, for infrastructure developments, electricity, water, then road constructions, schools, hospitals, like those projects, government projects, right? Provides funding for infrastructure projects such as transportation and energy supplies. which do not make short-term commercial return but are vital for development. So those projects are vital for development of that particular country. Right? Okay. Then there's another organization who is governing the international trade operations in the world. Right? That is Bank for International Settlement. BIS, Banks for International Settlement. That is central banker, central bank. Who is the bankers bank? Who is the bankers bank?
Central Bank.
Bankers bank is central bank. And BIS is the central bankers central bank. Powerful. That is central bankers central bank is BIS. That was the oldest financial organization supporting the international trade operations in the world. It was established in 1930. 1930. And it took 1948-45 after the World War, Second World War. This was before the Second World War. BIS was established. Originally to coordinate payment of German war operations among European or operations among European central banks. Headquarters in Basel, Switzerland. Is it ring any bells? Headquarters in Basel, Switzerland. The Uganda Hammer Bank dealer Basel 1, Basel 2, Basel 3 then requirements given by central bank. I mean Basel 1, Basel 2, Basel 3 the instructions are coming from Basel. Basel is the headquarters of BIS. Central bank get the instructions Basel 1, Basel 2, Basel 3 to capital adequacy of the banks, right? Otherwise, some of the banks will crash. The country might crash if the banks crashes, right? So to avoid that, they have introduced some strict monitoring of monetary systems, strict monitoring, right? Internationally coordinates monetary policy. Basel 1 famous concept banking KYC. Now you are doing for every transaction. Without checking the KYC, you don't start the operations. Nee? Is it correct? Lamai. How do you know? Out to දැන් ඒ පාර ඇහෙන්නේ නැද්ද දන්නේ
Sir,
ඇහෙනවද කියන්නේ කොහේනම් සද්දේ මට මේ දිගටම කතා කරන්න මේ මම බොරුවට කතා කරලා වැඩක් නැහැ ඒකේ මම අහන්නේ එතකොට මට ඔය පැත්තෙන් ඇහෙනවා කියන්නේ බැර නම් හුවක්වත් තියන්න මොන හරි එකක් තියන්න ඒක අපිට තේරෙනවා right KYC concept came from Basel 1. Why we are doing KYCs? To have a strict control about the customers. Customers like background check කරලා ඔක්කොම කරලා තමයි loans අපි දෙන්නේ. Facilities දෙන්නේ. ඒක හොඳ trend එකක්. Then internationally coordinates monetary policy to ensure orderly conditions in the international financial market managed by 20 board members representing G20 countries. G20 අහලා තියෙනනේ. All top countries, right? Is 20 board members representing G20 countries. ඉතින් අපේ ලංකාවේ රටකට කවදාකවත් BIS එකේ governing board එකට යන්න බෑ.
So I have a question.
Pardon?
I have one question.
Yeah.
So we got to know, I mean, as we understand, like the central bank is the main banks of all the banks, and they are
Yes.
all the banks controlled by the central bank.
Yes.
But now with these lessons, we got to know, like now the international organization can fund the private banks. So how the mechanism goes on? What's the control over that investment from the international bank?
You mean IFC?
Yes.
Now, your question was, central bank is the bank's banker, right? And your question is,
Yes.
can you repeat the question?
Now, so I think when international bank invest their money in the local bank sector,
Mhm.
isn't out of the control of the central bank?
No. When a international bank invests money in local banks, now for example, it's a very good question. In a country, the entire banking sector supposed to be controlled by central bank. Not only banking sector, the financial sector, right? Then time to time, there may be certain banks who will invest money on the local banks and trying to keep a control or to have a control over that particular bank. That's the question you're asking me.
Yes.
That's the question
No,
you're
the thing
asking
is,
me. Now I'm going step by step, right? Now,
okay.
in Sri Lanka, I can't remember any banks like that, but in other countries, in Bangladesh, then Myanmar, like that, in some countries, our banks, even commercial bank, has invested money, and they are buying shares, and they are keeping the control, right? So the same question, either we invest or some other bank invest money on our existing banks, right? But anyway, whatever happens, it has to be within the controls of the local central bank. The local central bank has to control. They have to give the approval. They will see what are the pros and cons. If these people invest, then what will happen to the other financial market, right? So, for example, if මට මේ වැඩි නම් කියන්න හොඳ නෑ බැංක්ස් වලට ක්ලාස් එක ඇතුළේ නම් මම ටක් ගාලා කියනවා මේ මේක එළියට යන්නේ ඉඳ මට බැරි ඔක අපි නිකන් හිතමු සාමාන්‍ය බැංකයක් කියලා පැනේෂියා වගේ බැංකයක් ලොකුම නෑ ඒක නැත්නම් කාගිල්ස් කියලා කිව්වොත් අපි වැඩිම අලුතින්ම අප එකක් නේ තාම පොඩියට නෑන්නේ කාගිල්ස් බැංක් එකට කවුරු අපි තුමු HSBC ඉන්වෙස්ට් කරනවා කියලා ඩොච් බැංක් ඉන්වෙස්ට් කරනවා කියලා ඉන්ටර්නැෂනල් right ලොකු ඉන්වෙස්ට්මන්ට් එකක් දාලා ගන්නවා දැම්මොත් මොකද වෙන්නේ the Cargill's bank will enhance their operations and maybe one day they may be one of the leading banks in Sri Lanka and that investment may affect the banking industry in Sri Lanka also because of the investment of that particular investor, right? It happened. So it is the responsibility of the central bank, our central bank, to monitor and see, and again to give necessary approval. ඒක නේද හැවෙ මගෙන්?
Yes, sir. That's the one I wanted to clear out.
Yeah, that's the one you're asking whether our central bank is getting involved in that operations. Yes, definitely. Right? That's in the BIS එකක්
Yeah.
BIS එකත් එනවා. BIS එකට එන්නේ ඉස්සෙල්ලා BIS එක ඔය approval process එකක් ඇති. මම දන්නේ නැහැ approval process එක මොකක්ද කියන එක. අලුතෙන් බැංක් එකට invest කරනවා නම් there may be approval process. Otherwise, you can't just go on investing money. But I know personally, commercial bank has invested a lot of banks in other countries, and they have either they have merged with those people or they have bought the controlling rights, right, of that small banks. Then it's easy for them to do their operations in that particular country. But once they go into that particular country, either Rome or Bangladesh or Myanmar, then the entire thing will be under the central bank regulation of Myanmar or central bank regulation of Bangladesh, right? So they had to. එතනින් එහාට මේ බැංක් එක නෑ. ඒක ඒ රටේ නීතියට බලපාන්නේ. Okay? In the history we
I
have
think, sir,
yes.
now
Tell me.
and there is now we have read a lot of news article and we understand that when World Bank is funding and they indirectly involved in the country's policy and they wanted to, we'll say when they funding to the government sector, they wanted to change some policies in terms of operating a certain government institution and
Yes.
that. So they wanted to privatize or some part of to rearrange some sort of agreement. Is it true or?
It is true. It is true. It
The
is
way
true.
they handle it?
It is true. It is true. And මේක තිබුණනේ මේ ඒක නෙමෙයි print වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. It is true because when World Bank is investing money, when they are promoting certain activities, and when they give certain money, more than World Bank, it is IMF. IMF has a big criticism, right? The IMF, the biggest criticism is for being out of touch with the local conditions, cultures, and environments in the countries, right? And because of that, when they give the money, they ask those governments to change the policies. They want to have policy reforms, right? They want to have policy reforms. So they said, now for example, these are good questions, right? These are things what we have to critically analyze. Now for example, we are having free education. From our budget, we can allocate only 6% of our budget allocations to our educations. If you want to improve the education, then we need funding. So when we go to World Bank funding, World Bank, of course, I mean, they'll do funding. If we go for IMF funding, they will say, okay, 100% of the funding, 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 we will fund you, the education system in Sri Lanka. But no more free education. Everybody has to pay and go to school. Right? So that is our culture, that is our policy. In 1945, CWW Kannangara has introduced this free education. Because of free education, all these scholars are now, I mean, in our big societies, right? Because most of the scholars have got the benefit of free education. ඒ ඔක්කොම අපි නැති වෙනවා. ඒව නැති වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම තමයි health sector. Even the health sector, it is like that. Or else they will say, if you want to develop the energy industry, okay, we will support Ceylon Electricity Board to set up some more diesel plants or coal plants or something. But you have to increase the taxes. Right? So always this criticism is there. ඕකන කියන්න අර අපේ මේ පාර ඡන්දය තිලන සහෝදරයෙක් කියන්නේ World Bank එකේ අපේ රිමෝට් එක තියන් ඉන්නවා කියලා නේද? අපේ country එකේ රිමෝට් එක World Bank එක තියන් ඉන්නවා කියලා. ඒගොල්ලෝ ගොඩක් වෙලාට World Bank කියලා ඒගොල්ලෝ අපේ commonly අපේ mean කරන්නේ World Bank කියලා. World Bank නෙමෙයි අතරම IMF එක. right? ඒගොල්ලෝ තමයි control එක අරන් යන්නේ. ඒගොල්ලෝ තමයි කියන්නේ මේක කරන්න ඕනේ මේක කරන්න ඕනේ මේක කරන්න ඕනේ කියලා. ඒ සමහර ඒවා අපේ කල්චර්ස් වලට හරියන්නේත් නැහැ. අපේ එන්වයරන්මන්ට් එකට හරියන්නේත් නැහැ. මේ අපේ ඉකොනොමික් කන්ඩිෂන්ස් වලට හරියන්නේත් නැහැ. ඒවා කන්ට්‍රඩික්ට් වෙනවා. That's totally truth in that. Right? Those are political issues. අපි පිටින් ගන්න අපිට conditions දානවා. ඒ conditions දාලා තමයි ඒගොල්ලෝ කරන්නේ. Right? Then shall we go back to this one? Then increasing confidence in the international banking system and setting common competitive conditions for international banks, a level playing field. In 1995, new prudent standards were introduced to constrain the market risk, Basel II. Then in 1999, revised and refined yardsticks for assessment of bank lending and liquidity risk, Basel III. Basel III එක ඇවිල්ලා අපිට කිව්වා Basel III එක ආවේ කුයි කාලෙද එලා තියෙනවා 1999. Which year it came to Sri Lanka? In 2015. අපිට ආවේ 2015 වල Basel III එක ආවේ. ඇවිල්ලා කිව්වා මේ ටිකක් කරන්න කියලා. දැන් ඔක්කොම banks වල because of Basel III capital adequacy ratios වැඩි වුණා. Then we'll have to keep a lot of money in the central banks as reserves. එහෙම තියෙනකොට මොකද වෙන්නේ? rates නගිනවනේ. banks වල lending power එක අඩු වෙනවා. Because they had to keep a lot of reserves with the central bank. Right? ඔය ඔක්කොම side effects එනවා. ඔය control කරන්නේ මේ international organizations. ඔය වෙන side effects අපිට effect වෙනවා අපේ international trade operations වලට. අපේ price stability හැම එකටම ඔවා directly or indirectly it gets involved. Then another organization is Asian Development Bank. Asian Development Bank. Asian Development Bank or ADB is very much familiar to us. People like Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan. all the Asian countries are using these facilities, ADB. It was established in 1966, headquarters in Manila, Philippines. ADB has 67 members, makes loans and equity investments for economic and social development of member countries. ADB loans නම් ගොඩාක් එනවා. ළඟදී දිනම නිතරම දෙනවා නේද මේ NTB, NDB, සම්පත්, commercial මම දන්නවා ගොඩක් කොම් බැංක්ස් වල දෙනවා. ADB loans එනවා alternate energy development work වලට මොනවද මේවට කියන්නේ solar power නේද? solar power අපි ගන්නවා නම් අපේ ගේකට ගන්නවා නම් solar power, the banks will give us loans at a concessional rates 8%, 9%. මම මේ කියන්නේ about 2-3 years back. Now everything is 8%, 9%. But even those days, when the lending rates were ranging from 15 to 20, they were giving loans at 9% or 8% for a specific purpose. ADB කරන්නේ එකයි. ගොඩක් කරන්නේ agriculture වලට. The largest shareholders are Japan, US, Australia, and New Zealand. Lending activity focuses on energy projects, energy projects, transportation, agriculture and industry. Agriculture and industry. Right? Asian governments are the biggest borrowers. Asian governments are the biggest borrowers. ADB loans family ne godak nitarama time to time banks are getting ADB loans. ADB funds when you disburse at a very low rate, concession rates. Right. I think that ends this presentation. Organizations ගැන කතා කළා. When we are doing international trade, we have to have certain idea about these organizations, especially the GATT that was after the Second World War, how it was started, right? To control the general tariff and trade. GATT, then how the World Trade Organization began, the demise of GATT, and then the birth of World Trade Organization, and then we discuss about the basic principles and all of the WTO, then IMF, right? IMF and what are the criticism on IMF and all. Another criticism in IMF was benefits. අපි IMF benefits කතා කළේ නැද්ද? ඒක skip වුණාද? IMF benefits, that's a very, very important thing. I don't know how it skipped. IMF benefits, IMF. Yeah, okay. It may facilitate the balance growth of international trade, provide resources to help members in balance of payment difficulties. IMF is the one who always support to settle our, to meet our balance of payment, BOP deficit. Again, හැමදාම budget එකක් කිට්ටු වෙනකොට we are going for IMF grants. Otherwise, countries like Sri Lanka, we can't never balance our own budget without the external help. So when we go to those organizations, they will say, especially IMF, right, the ruthless guy, they will say, okay, we'll help you. You need $100 billion, we'll give you $100 billion. But these are the conditions. These are the conditions. You have to change the entire education systems. You have to change the what do you call this health sector, right? They will put down conditions, right? Criticism on IMF, out of touch with local economic conditions, right? That we said another criticism is that IMF programs are only designed to address the poor governance and excessive government spending. Poor governance and excessive government spending and excessive government intervention in the market. What they say is, IMF always says is, don't get involved in government sector. Government, they are asking governments not to intervene in the market. Let the market demand and supply decide what is the correct thing. But in countries like Sri Lanka, is it a good thing? Can we survive in that way? Some developed countries, yes, right? Ours is developing country. So if we allow the way the IMF wants us, government not to get involved, everything privatized, can we survive? Just imagine all the private bus, they will say, IMF will say, okay, we will give you support to restructure the transport industry in Sri Lanka. No more CTB. Put everything, give everything to private bus owners. කොහොම තියේද? කොහොම තියේද එතකොට? We will be at their mercy. අන්තිමට IMF කියන විදිහට තමයි අපිට නටන්න වෙන්නේ. ඒගොල්ලෝ බෙරේ ගහනවා අපි නටනවා. ඕක තමයි ඔය countries අපේ වගේ countries වලට වෙන්නේ. අපිට government අපේ වගේ countries වල there should be certain government intervention in the market. Otherwise, you can't. Vegetable market එකෙන් බලන්නකෝ දැන් bee onions, potatoes මොනවද වෙන්නේ කියලා. ඒ ටිකෙන් උගල decide කරන්න. You are not small ones, right? You are reading papers, reading articles, seeing the what do you call this TV. එතන අපිට බලන්න පුළුවන්, right? Then we discuss about World Bank, then two arms of the World Bank, IBRD and IDA, and then we talk about IFC, the private arm lending to the private sector, then BIS, Bank for International Settlement, and then Asian Development Bank, right? Okay, now it's 3:10. We'll take a small break of 10 minutes and I'll be back in 3:20, right? Meanwhile, you can also have a cup of tea and get ready with your UCP 600 notes, right? Because I want to discuss few more articles today. We have discussed up to Article 16. මට ඒකත් බලලා කියන්න. ඔයගොල්ලෝ දැන් බලලා තියෙන්නේ. මම හිතන්නේ Article 16 වෙනකන් දෙකක් අපි ඩිස්කස් කළා. අපි එතනින් එහාට ඩිස්කස් කරන්න වෙනවා. එහෙම නැත්නම් Article 16 17, 18, 19 19 කරන්නේ මම මේවා ආටිකල්ස් ටික වෙනම කරන්නේ ට්‍රාන්ස්පෝර්ට් ඩොකියුමන්ට්ස් ටික ඒ අරෙන් අනිත් ඒවා ටික පොත තියාගෙන රෙඩි වෙලා ඉන්න right
Yes, sir. Yes.
whenever I used to finish a session early I'm going through with you guys discussing the UCP articles because for a trade practitioner UCP articles are very, very important. It's very important that you understand the UCP articles. Most of the times, the people, even people who are working in trade finance departments, they are not familiar with certain articles, the gray areas in those articles, right? I think I have discussed with you up to Article 16. Article 17, shall we have we discussed? Article 17?
No, sir.
No. Original documents and copies? No. Right?
No.
Right. Now you are having the UCP. It says at least one original of each document stipulated in the credit must be presented. Sometimes whenever we open LCs, we said one original and 4 copies, right? Or otherwise we'll say 4 copies. Invoice in 4 copies. When you say invoice in 4 copies, at least one invoice should be original. The others can be photocopies or other things, right? So at least one original of each document stipulated in the credit must be presented. Right, thank you. Right, number. Just to tell you something, because just now Meenaka gave me, I have given you some assignments to do. I'm not giving any much, but if you do the assignments, it's good for you, right? And few people has given their assignments. Only today I got it, right? I'll give the names. Devasiri Nayaka of Sampath Bank. Is it there? A.R. Devasiri Narayana. Devasiri Narayana innawada? Ada class එකේ නැද්ද? Then Imbulana
Yes, sir.
innawa. මොකද වර්ෂය bank පුදා?
Sampath Bank.
That's also Sampath, right? Sampath. ඔගොල්ලෝ ඔක්කොම එකට එවලා දෙනවා. හොඳයි ඒක. Then Abhisekara.
She was there.
STM Abhisekara innawada?
Still not joined, sir, after the break.
After the break. Okay. Then Javadana Suru.
No, he is not today.
Bhagya Sampath.
No.
No. All these people are from trade.
Yes, sir.
All are from trade. It's good. Kasun Ratnayaka.
Not join after the break.
Join after the break. Dihan Veerasinghe.
he was in the previous batch, I think. And he want to repeat the.
Okay. Himasha Dunuvila. Again, Sampath Bank.
Not join after break.
Right. Break के पास गीला रहे मामा. Right. Okay. Anyway, good. This is the way I want it, because then at least I can check these things and give you the feedback. Okay. We'll continue with the Article 17. A bank shall treat as an original any document bearing an apparently original signature, mark, stamp, or label of the issuer of the document, unless the document itself indicates that it is not an original. What do you mean by that? A bank shall treat as an original any document bearing an apparently original signature, mark, stamp, or label. There's no need, or it is not a necessity to have the signature in a document to say it's original. Even a stamp to that effect will take it as original. If the original seal එක තියෙන mark එකක් හරි stamp එකක් හරි label එකක් හරි තියෙනවා නම් of the issuer of the document, it's enough, unless the document itself indicates that it is not an original. Unless it is, the document itself states it's a copy. එතකොට ඒක original එකක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. Right? C, unless a document indicates otherwise, a bank will also accept a document as original if it appears to be written, typed, perforated, or stamped by the document issuer's hand. Right? Unless a document indicates otherwise, a bank will also accept document as original if it appears to be written. එහෙම type කළා. Perforate කියන අර දෙකක් තමයි දැන් නම් වැඩි නෑ. අපි banking පටන් ගත්ත කාලේ තිබුණා perforate කරන අපිට හිල් වලින් විදලා ගන්නෙ. Right? හිල් විදලා වගේ. Or label at the issuer of the document, unless the document itself indicates that it is not an original. Sorry. Yeah. See, unless document indicates otherwise, the bank will also accept the document as original if it appears to be written, typed, perforated, stamped by the document issuer's hand, or appear to be on the document issuer's original stationery. States that it is original unless the statement appears not to apply to the document presented. Right? State that it is original. මොන විදිහට තිබ්බත් අපි ඔරිජිනල් කියලා ගන්නවා. D, if a credit requires presentation of copies of documents, presentation of either originals or copies is permitted. If a credit requires presentation of copies of document, presentation of either originals or copies is permitted. Any issue on that? මට නෙමෙයි ඔයගලන්ට issue එකක් තියෙනවා දැන් කියන්න. Right? E, if a credit requires presentation of multiple documents by using terms such as in duplicate, in twofold, or in two copies, this will be satisfied by the presentation of at least one original and the remaining number in copies, except when the document itself indicates otherwise. Now, if a credit requires presentation of multiple documents by using terms, if the LC says in duplicate, in duplicate කිව්වහම කොහොමද අපි දෙන්න ඕනේ? At least there should be one original. At least there should be one original when you say duplicate, right? One original and one copy, any number of copies. In twofold, ඒකත් ඒ වගේමයි. In two copies, right? In two copies කියනකොටත් අපිට this will be satisfied by the presentation of at least one original and the remaining number in copies. Now, if I ask this question, in a transport document, if the requirement is original required, එහෙම වුණාම transport document එක ගහලා තියෙනවා originals required. Originals required කියලා තිබුණොත් then all should be originals. Then the one original and others copies theory won't apply for transport documents, right? If copy is required and the original presented, what is going to happen? Transport document when you talk about the transport documents, make question and answer කරන්න. හරිද? ඒකේ LC එකේ requirement එක තමයි copies required. Transport document copies required. But they have presented originals. Is it a discrepancy or not?
No.
No. Yeah, NTB, no?
Yes.
Right. Something कैसे NTB කියලා. Right. Then තව කවුද? තව මොකක්ද දෙන්නේ?
Discrepant?
You say discrepant. What's your name?
I'm Penny, sir, in TV.
Penny. Penny Veerasekara. Okay. Then what about others? Manoli? What is your answer? Is it discrepant or not? The LC asks copies required of transport document. What they have presented is originals.
Discrepant.
Discrepant. Woman gave away. කනාමුට්ටිය ගහනවා වගේද? Right? Nalin? What do you think? මේක අපිට තව පස්සට මුණ එනවා. Right? As per the ISBP එකේ විදියට if the LC asks for copies and if they have presented the originals, then it is a discrepancy. It is discrepancy. But that is only in transport documents. Other documents, it is not a discrepancy. Right? Okay. Article 18. Commercial invoice. a commercial invoice A, a commercial invoice A1 must appear to have been issued by the beneficiary, except as provided in Article 38. Must appear to have been issued by the beneficiary. Always the commercial invoice has to be issued by the beneficiary. But there's one instance it can be changed. What instance? What is
Transferable.
transferable?
Transfer.
But transferable is middleman, he will change the invoice into in his favor. He will substitute the invoice. He will substitute the invoice and the what do you call that draft invoice on the draft. Okay. එහෙනම් කොහොමද වෙන ඉන්වොයිස් එකක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්? එහෙනම් කොහොමද වෙන ඉන්වොයිස් එකක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්? ප්ලීස් ළමයි කතා කරන්නකෝ. දැන් මේ ක්ලාස් එකක් අපිට ඕනේ ඔයගොල්ලෝ කතා කරන්න ඕන මාත් එක්ක. In article,
So can you repeat the question?
My question is, yes, it can happen in transferable DC, the middleman or the first beneficiary will replace the commercial invoice with his own invoice. Is it correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Right? Now, are there any instances where the beneficiary, the first beneficiary has not changed his invoices? We are getting the invoice from somebody else, some third party. Some third party invoices. Is there any, or can it happen? Instead of LC is issued, LC says the beneficiary is X. That's the first beneficiary. The issuing bank doesn't know who is the second beneficiary. As far as I am concerned, X is my beneficiary. But you are getting an invoice from Y. Can this happen? Can this happen? Normally, this guy, X will, when Y gave his invoice, the X will replace it with X's invoice. If X has not changed the invoices and just submitting the first beneficiary's bank is submitting the second beneficiary's invoice, can a thing like that happen? If so, when? If so, when?
So if the LC states that third party documents are acceptable, then it can come, no?
Third party documents acceptable may transferable LC එකක්.
Then commercial invoice has to come from the person we open the LC, ne? third party BLs.
Person open the LC is
Beneficiary
buyer.
X. No.
Person open the LC is the buyer.
The commercial
Right.
invoice has to come from X.
X.
From the
But can they submit commercial invoice from Y?
No.
Normally this
Y
happens.
commercial invoice is dila tiyenne. Can it happen?
Yeah, normal. Yeah, can happen. So normally this happens. This can happen. So normally, if we buy something from trader, but the original, if the good dispatched by the manufacturer instead of trader, then he will give the invoice from the we'll say manufacturer.
Okay.
In that case, in this scenario, that can be happen in that way.
Like, what anyway, that is a normal scenario, no? No.
Yeah,
in a way,
no.
that's a normal scenario. It will be manufactured by Y, and Y will export it and give the documents to X. Now X has to replace the commercial invoice and the draft. Okay?
Yeah, instead of X putting his invoice, we'll say if mistakenly if we put it his manufacturer's invoice. In that case, it can happen.
It can happen. කිව්වට මට තාම උත්තරේ හරියටම ආවේ නැහැ.
Sir.
Yeah.
So if the first beneficiary fails to replace the invoice?
If the first beneficiary
fails to replace the invoice? Then the first advising bank can send the documents to the issuing bank, no?
Right. What is your name?
I'm Christy, sir.
Christy.
Yeah.
Randall.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Right. Christy is perfect. What is the article?
Article 39, sir.
39?
I. So 38 I, sir.
38?
I.
Very good. 38 I. Article 38 I ke තියෙනවා. If the first beneficiary is to present its own invoice and draft, if any, but fails to do so in the first demand, or if invoices presented by the first beneficiary create discrepancies that did not exist in the presentation by the second beneficiary. අපි discrepancy එකට ගන්න අරක කෙලින්ම යාගෙන් එනවා නම් බැංක් එකේ කවරින් ලෙටර් එකකුත් එක්ක. If he fails to do it, we can't hold on to the thing, right? Okay. Then 18.3 must be made out in the same currency as the credit, and 4 need not be signed. Common must be made out in the same currency as the credit. If the currency of the credit is US dollars, then you can't have sterling pounds invoice. Invoice also should be in the same currency. Otherwise, it is discrepant. And the item A4 is need not be signed. Make her important. ගොඩාක් කට්ටිය invoice එකේ signature නැත්නම් මේගොල්ලෝ quote කරනවා discrepancy කියලා.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
The performer invoice. Unless, of course, stated that this is a computer generator and does not need a signature, does the performer invoice need to be signed at all times, be it LC or OTT or anything?
Yeah. Do you check the performer invoice is signed when you open the LCs? Tell me your practical part. Do you check? Yeah. Have you been asked to check?
I have been asked to check.
whether it is originally signed,
Whether there is a signature.
whether there's a
Signature.
signature.
Okay. Yeah.
The pro forma invoice is between which parties? Pro forma invoice is
the buyer and the seller.
Between the buyer and the seller. Right? We have nothing to do. We have nothing to do. So if the seller has sent you a pro forma, right? If the seller has sent you a pro forma for, if you say $50,000 without the signature, why the bank is checking the signature? But answer a good if you say so, that you have been asked to check in again.
No, thing is, like that has been an issue also. Like I believe that the signature is not necessary, but then the my authorizing person says that the signature is necessary. So there is like a mismatch. I know that I feel that the signature is not necessary, but then when my manager says it is, then there is a conflict.
Yeah, it's contradicting.
Contradicting, yeah.
Yeah, contradicting. Thing is like this, now, even I think it is not necessary, because even in a commercial invoice, if you are not worried about, are we paying on commercial invoice or not? Are we paying on commercial invoice or pro forma invoice? Are we paying on commercial invoice or pro forma invoice?
Commercial invoice.
Commercial invoice. We never pay on pro forma invoice, right? If you are sending money out, then it has to be
commercial
invoice. It has to be a commercial invoice, right? Emanang, what's a big deal of having the signature in the pro forma? Because that is only, we are stating the conditions that we have to put in the LC, right? Whether it's the duration, currency, from where to where, those are the things we are checking, right?
It's like a supporting document, sir.
Supporting document. Even if the customer has not signed, even if the beneficiary has not given the signed pro forma invoice, now tell me, right? If you are the customer, you are the importer, you come to the bank with the LC application. One of your bank customer, right? He comes to the bank with LC application duly signed by him. He gives authority. And if you are insisting on the signature, he can take the pro forma back and ask somebody else to sign and bring it back. How you are going to check how you are going to verify the signature? That now tell me. පාරට ගිහිල්ලා එයාම සයින් කරනවා මොනවාරි එකකින්. ඉවරයි නේද? ඒතර සිග්නේචර් එක තියෙනවා. දැන් කවුද මේ සයින් කරලා තියෙන්නේ? සිග්නේචර් එක නැතුව තියෙන එක වැඩිය හොඳයි. මේ හොරස්සමක් තියෙන්නේ. Are we going to check that signature, the verification? Yes or no?
No.
No. එහෙනම් අපි පිළිගන්නවා. Having said that, there's a thing like this. If it is a advance payment, if it's an advance payment we are doing, right? Now just imagine the two scenarios. When we are doing an advance payment, then we are sending the money out. The money will be remitted from Sri Lanka to some other country, right? Below $50,000. එතකොට එන performer එක, even I will insist to have a properly signed. එතකොට මේ authentication එක අපිට ඕන. නිකන් පාර යන කොල කෑල්ලකට අපිට පුළුවන් සල්ලි ටිකක් යවන්න. පාරේ වැටලා තියෙන කොල කෑල්ලකට උනත් සල්ලි ටිකක් එළියට යවන්න පුළුවන්. money laundering කරන්න පුළුවන්. නේද? කරන්න පුළුවන් නේද?
Yes, sir.
කෝ ළමයි මාත් එක්ක කතා කරන්නකෝ. අපිට money laundering can happen. හැබැයි දැන් මේක අපිට මෙහෙම තිබ්බොත් එහෙම මේ එතකොට මට ආගිය කරත හැකි එන සිග්නේචර් එක ඕනයි කියලා. අඩු ගානේ ඒකත් ඉතින් වැඩක් නැහැ. I'm not going to check the signatures with anything, but at least I'm comfortable. දැන් එහෙම එක නැති එකක් නම් අද මට නම් ඕනේ නැහැ. So you are correct. It's like penny the question එක ඇවේ.
Oh, sir.
So
sir, පොඩි clarification එකක් කර LC එකේ perform එකේ signature එක. දැන් අපි commercial beneficiary original document submit කරනකොට ඒ commercial invoice එකේ authenticity එක check කරගන්න ඕන නම් අපිට perform එකේ signature එකක් තිබුණොත් ඒක helpful වෙනව නේද?
මොකටද check කරන්නේ?
commercial invoice එක දැන් අපි payment එකට original documents ආවම bank එකට commercial invoice එකේ authenticity එක check කරගන්න අවශ්‍ය නම් whether it's a right or whether it's a flake invoice. If we have a invoice in a pro forma invoice, then we can cross check, isn't it?
What's your name, brother?
Shirley.
Shirley?
Yeah.
Shirley from which bank?
No, I'm from not a bank, it's
not a bank.
From
right.
Yeah.
Enang ekai wa Shirley kotidaku neda?
Yes, sir.
Shirley, when we are checking the documents, we are not bothered. If the Article 18 says commercial invoice need not be signed. Need not be signed. Right? Need not be signed කියලා තිබ්බට පස්සේ whether it's signed or not, we are not bothered. And we are not going to check the authenticity of the commercial invoice signatures at any time. No way. Right? We are not bothered whether the signature is there or not. We don't bother. Okay. check And the other thing is the pro forma invoices can be issued now in a bank or even you are working in a company.
Yeah, I'm working for the pharmaceutical company.
You are working in a company, export company, or I presume, right?
No. We are manufacturing company. We import the raw materials.
Right. You are manufacturing company. We are importing the raw materials. Now, in your company, how many authorized people are there to sign these documents and all? There must be definitely more than one person authorized to sign.
Right?
Yeah, authorized to sign.
There are many.
So A can sign the pro forma invoice and the B can sign the commercial invoice. Because A is the guy who is issuing the import LC or the send the application, right? B must be somebody else. Okay? The issue එකක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපිට ඕනේ නැහැ. අතරම signature එක ඕනේ නැහැ. You don't have to bother about the signature when it comes to commercial invoice. අපි කානික commercial invoice එකෙන් බලලා payments කරන්නෙත් නැහැ. Only thing what we do is when we receive the commercial invoice, we check the data content in the commercial invoice is tallying with the other documents. That is the most important thing what we have to check. If the data contents, when you say data content, if the LC says shorts, in the commercial invoice says shirts, then there's a difference. Then we are not doing the payment. We have asked for shorts, now they have sent shirts, right? So that's a different scenario, but not the signature or anything. Then 18B, a nominated bank acting on its nomination, a confirming bank, if any, or the issuing bank may accept a commercial invoice issued for an amount in excess of the amount permitted by the credit. And its decision will be binding upon all parties, provided the bank in question has not honored or negotiated for an amount in excess of that permitted by the credit. A nominated bank acting on its nomination, a confirming bank, if any, or the issuing bank. මේ තුනම they are all three parties are eligible for the payment to be done. Am I correct? A nomination, a nominated bank can pay, negotiate. A confirming bank can negotiate, or the issuing bank will negotiate then. If the documents are complied with the terms and conditions of the LC, they will pay, right? Or the issuing bank may accept a commercial invoice issued for an amount in excess of the amount permitted by the credit. The credit, LC $10,000. US dollars, 10,000, right? An amount in excess of the amount permitted by the credit, and its decision will be binding upon all parties, provided the bank in question has not honored or negotiated for an amount in excess of that permitted by the credit. LCK did the make US dollars 10,500. This is LC. This is commercial invoice. I think 10% plus or minus. 10% plus or minus කියලා අපි කියනවා. එහෙම තිබුණොත් දැන් මේක 10,500 ආවොත් අපිට ගෙවන්න පුළුවන්ද? Can we pay?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
Yes. Definitely we can pay. Right? Definitely we can pay. See, the description of the goods, services, or performance in a commercial invoice must correspond with that appearing in the credit. The description of the goods, services, or performance in a commercial invoice must correspond with that appearing in the credit. Normally, in a letter of credit, the most important document is the commercial invoice. So when it comes to goods description or the service, the entire thing as it is should appear on the commercial invoice. That is important. All the details should appear on the commercial invoice, right? ඔබ තමයි කට්ටිය වරද්ද ගන්න. Article 19 to 25, all transport documents will do it separately. Ek samahara vitaka mama karawe ehema naththam Mrs. Anoma karawe, right? Api denage ekkenek karana. Most probably Mrs. Anoma will discuss these articles with you when she is handling supply chain management with you, right? Then Article 26. Article 26. On deck, shipper's load and count set by shipper to contain and charges additional to freight. What are those? Right? The transport document must not indicate that the goods are or will be loaded on deck. If a transport document in a BL, if you say the goods are loaded, goods are on deck, or will be loaded on deck, a clause on a transport document stating that the goods may be loaded on deck is acceptable. Api discrepancy atira quote karana transport document එක තියෙනවා නම් goods on deck කියලා. On deck transport documents will reject it as a discrepancy document. එහෙම නැත්නම් goods will be loaded on deck. Will be loaded on deck. ඒකත් අපි reject කරනවා. But a clause on the transport document stating that the goods may be loaded on deck is acceptable. May be loaded on deck කියන එක acceptable. ඒක මට ambiguity එකක් තියෙනවා ඒකේ. May be loaded on deck කියන එක later they can load on deck වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්. Right? But anyway, here the ruling is may be loaded on deck is acceptable, will be loaded on deck unacceptable, on deck unacceptable. ඒක කටපාඩම් කළාවේ තියාගන්න. Right? I can remember a few years back when I was in Dubai, our Dera branch people, they had a issue with one of their customers has sent a shipment of bee onions to Colombo. Colombo ඇරලා ගිහලා තියන්නේ on deck. BL එකේ තියෙනවා on deck කියලා ගහලා. BL එකේ on deck තියෙනකොට මේ බෑග් එකකින් රිෆියුස් කරලා ඩිස්ක්‍රිපන් කියලා. හැබැයි මොකද වෙලා තිබුණේ නැහැ. පස්සේ මේගොල්ලෝ ආගිය කරලා if the goods are not damaged, make a accept කරනවා. බැංකුවෙන් ගෝ බෑ කියලා. discrepant කියලා. ඉතින් ඕක කියලා documents ගත්තේ නැහැ customer. Customer ගත්තේ නැහැ on deck. On deck තමයි බඩු ගිහිලා තියෙන්නේ ඉන්දියාවල ඉඳන් ඩුබායි වලින් LC කරලා ඉන්දියාව වලින් බඩු ගිහිල්ලා. ඉන්දියාව නැත්නම් පාකිස්තාන වලින් බඩු ගිහිල්ලා තිබුණේ. එතකොට මේ පැත්තේ බැංක් එකේ ඕ 1 month ගිහිල්ලා තිබුණා. ගිහිල්ලා දැන් on deck ගිය බඩු කුණු වෙලා. දැන් බීලුණුනේ. බීලුණු කුණු වෙලා. දැන් තාම මේ dispute එක යනවා. ඊපස්සේ මට ආව query එක අපිලා මම බැලුවා කවුද බැංක් එකේ කියලා. ලංකාවේ එකක් කිව්ව හින්දා තමයි මට කියන්න දුන්නේ. අනේ පොඩ්ඩක් සපෝට් එකක් දෙන්න අඳුරන කෙනෙක්ද දන්නේ නැහැ කියලා. බලද්දී සම්පත් බැංක්. දැන් කියන බන්න සම්පත් බැංක් එක ඔයගොල්ලෝ කරලා තියෙන්නේ හරි දේද වැරදි දේද කියලා. සම්පත් බැංක් ක්‍රවුඩ් එකක් ඉන්නවනේ දැන් ඉස්සුරුලේම නේද? ඔයගොල්ලෝ තමයි රිජෙක්ට් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. LC was silent about the transport documents, right? But on the BL, it has mentioned on deck. BNN. The bank has refused. The bank has a right to refuse now as a issuing bank. Side payment issuing bank refuse it was a customer customer gani. Customer gani. About the customer the bank make a refuse කරලා තියෙන්නේ ඔයාලා කැමති නම් ඔයා ගන්න. එහෙම අපි කියන්නේ. එහෙම නේද අපි කියන්නේ? හා? දැන් මට කියන්න බලන්න සම්පත් බැංක් ක්‍රවුඩ් එක තමයි. ඉන්නවනේ ක්‍රවුඩ් එක. හිමාෂා වට කියන මට දැන් ආසයි අහන්න ඒකයි මම ක්වෙස්චන් එකක් අරගත්තේ. වාග්ය සුරු අබේසේකර ගුලාන හිටියා මෙතන. What do you think? Is your bank correct or wrong? Is your bank correct or wrong? What is that? Can when a banks look at that can discrepancy quote kala haride අපි මම නම් දැක්ක ගමන් කිව්වා සම්පත් බැංක් කියනකොටම no issue කියලා. මොකද well guided. Your trade is well guided. That I know. Those days. Anyway, what any news about Mr. Paramadana? ඔගන්න මොනවාර නිවුස් තියෙනවද? සනීපද නැද්ද? තාම සනීප නැද්ද කියලා දන්නෙත් නැද්ද? සම්පත් එකේ ළමයි එහෙම කෙනෙක් හිටියද කියලා දන්නවද?
Don't know, sir.
හා? මොකද? මිස්ටර් ධර්මවර්ධන කියලා කෙනෙක් හිටියයි කියලා දන්නවද? පරම ධර්මවර්ධන කියලා.
Yes, we know, but don't know what is situation right now.
You don't know that situation.
Okay.
Is one time even my guru, right? He's a very nice person. Unfortunately, he cannot actively involved in these things now. I think he is still sick. What do you think about the discrepancy? මට ඕනේ මේව කතා කරන්න ඔයගොල්ලොත් එක්ක. So you people have quoted discrepant කියලා. ඔයගොල්ලෝ එක ස්ටෑන්ඩ් එක ගන්නවද? හොඳ නැද්ද? ඔය සරල ක්වෙස්චන් එක මම අහන්නේ. Your stand is correct. Right? Sampath Bank is correct. Because if the LC has not allowed, on deck transportation is allowed, right? If they have not mentioned, then if the transport document says on deck, then we'll quote it as a discrepancy. ගමන් දැක්ක ගමන් කිව්වා සම්පත් බැංක් කියලා ආපු ගමන් කිව්වා nothing to worry ඔච්චර කාල මාසයක් ගිය කේස් එක ගන්න මිස්ටර් ධර්මවර්ධනට ඔක රිෆර් කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒතකොට එතනින් එහාට අහන්න දෙයක් නැහැ මම දැක්ක කොරස්පොන්ඩන්ස් ටික බලනකොට මිස්ටර් ධර්මවර්ධන ඒවලා තිබුණා එන්න හැල්ලක් කෝට් කරලා ICC case studies මේ ඔක්කොම දාලා නියම මේ ටික ඉගෙන ගන්න එකට ඉගෙන ගන්න. ඒ ඉන්න මෝඩියන්ට ඉතින් වැඩක් නැහැ. ඉතින් තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ නේ මේක මොකද්ද මේ කියන්නේ කියලා. මේ මිනිස්සු එකම දේ ඉන්දියන් කාර්යෝ ටික ආගියු කරන්නේ. ඉතින් මොකක්ද වෙන්නේ? ඉතින් ඩෙක් එක උඩ අරන් ගියාම මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ කියලා. මොකද්ද ඩෙක් එක උඩ අරන් ගියාම වෙන්නේ? Why on deck transports are prohibited?
The damage can be more.
Damage can be more. It depends on the goods, right? ඕක අපි හිතමු බියානියන්ස් on deck යනකොට මොකද වෙන්නේ? sea water එනවා rough sea එකේදී sea water ගහනවනේ. deck එකට ගහනවා. deck එකට ගැව්වම මේ ඔක්කොම නරක වෙනවා. දැන් ඕක අරන් ගියා නම් ලුණු වගේ එකක් පිටි ලුණු ගෝණි අරන් ගියා නම් කොහමද? ඉන්දියාවෙන් ලුණු පටවනවා ගෝණි වල ලුණු අරන් යන්නෙත් අර හිල් හිල් තියෙන දැල් ගෝණි වලනේ. කොළඹට එනකොට ගෝණි ටික විතරක් තියෙනවා. ලුණු නැහැ. ඇයි? ලුණු ටික ගිහිල්ලා වතුර ගහලම ලුණු ටික දී වෙලා ගිහිල්ලා. ගෝණි ටික තියෙනවා. Right? On deck ගෙන්නේ. For example, have you heard about අපි අර පොඩි කාලේ තුවාල වුණාම දාන්නේ අම්මලා අල්ලගෙන දානවා අපි දුවනවා බෑග් එකේ අඬ දුවනවා මේ හයිඩ්‍රජන් පෙරොක්සයිඩ් දාන තුවාල වලට පරණ තුවාල වලට දැකලා තියෙනවද දැම්මම පෙන වගේ එළියට එනවා දන්නවනේ පෙන වගේ එළියට එනවා පරණ තුවාල වලට දැම්මම පෙන වගේ එන්නේ ඔක්සිජන් එක එන්නේ right hydrogen peroxide කියන්නේ H2O2 H2O2 තමයි hydrogen peroxide. එතන hydrogen peroxide තියෙන්නේ දුර පාට බෝතල් වල. මේ කැලේ H2O2 එන්නේ. ඒ දුර පාට බෝතලේ තියෙන එක මේ එළියට ගත්තට පස්සේ H2O වෙනවා plus oxygen. යමු. අවුරුදු 55කට පස්සේ තාම කෙමිස්ට්‍රි මතකයි. right? එතකොට අපි මේ H2O කියන වතුර එනවා අනිත් එක ඔක්සිජන් යනවා. When it exposed to the direct sunlight ඔක තමයි වෙන්නේ. දැන් on deck අරන් ආව නම් කොහොමද hydrogen peroxide මේ වෙලා direct sunlight එකේ එහෙන් ගේනවා ජර්මනි වලින් hydrogen peroxide ගේනවා ලංකාවට එනකොට තියෙන වතුර hydrogen peroxide ගිහිල්ලා මේ වෙලා ඉතින් ඒකින්ද on deck අපි දෙන්නේ නැහැ but maybe loaded on deck කියන එක acceptable there's some arguments on that right wording එක තමයි එන්නේ B. A transport document bearing a clause such as shipper's load and count and said by shipper to contain is acceptable. What do you mean by shipper's load and count? A transport document bearing a clause such as shipper's load and count. What do you mean by load and count?
Shipper exactly count the number of boxes or a carton before loading.
Right.
Confirm.
And shipper says they have count the exact number of cargo or units or whatever, and they say shippers load and count kila dala ekula dana 400 units, right? So I think you are from a company, no?
Yes.
You are from export company.
Import company.
Import company. අපි ඔයා දන්නවා ඔයගොල්ලෝ දන්නවා ලොජිස්ටික් පැත්ත. එතකොට එතින්දී සිපර් කියනවා එයා කවුන්ට් කරලා දාලා තියෙනවා. දැන් ඒක තමයි බොක්ස් එක වහලා. සීල් කරපු බොක්ස් එකක්. බොක්ස් එකේ උඩ ගහලා තියෙනවා shippers load and count. මෙච්චරයි 400 units. ඇතුලේ තියෙන්නේ 400 units. On the BL they say that they have accepted a cargo 1 4x6 box saying shippers load and count. So we'll have to take the shipper's word. 400 කියන එක අපි ගන්න වෙනවා. අනිත් එක said by shipper to contain. Said by shipper to contain. The same thing. The shipper says contains table knives. Contains table knives. Contains table knives කියලා ගත්තාම දැන් මේකත් seal box එකක්. The shipper has mentioned said by shipper to contain table knives. So those are acceptable things. එහෙම නැත්නම් මට මෙතන customs වලට අර කොහටද ආවම මම box එක කඩලා හැම පැත්තෙම table knives කීයද තියෙන්නේ කියලා ඔක්කොම බලන්න ඕන. එහෙම බලන්නේ නැහැ. Right? 26C is yeah.
I have a question, sir. Now, you may say now, can we ask the clean bill of landing to prevent the loading on a deck? Can we ask the clean bill of landing in order to prevent the cargo loading on a deck? Cargo loading on a deck.
Clean bill of lading is clean bill of lading has nothing to do with cargo on deck. Clean bill of lading has nothing to do with cargo on deck. When I discuss the next article 27, you will understand. After that, we'll discuss your question again. Right?
Okay.
In a clean bill of lading is something different. Not on deck part. On deck part is a different thing. Article 26 is a completely different thing. Nothing to do with the clean bill of lading. Right? I will discuss the clean bill of lading and then we'll come back to that question. Anyway, good question. See, transport document may bear a reference by stamp or otherwise to charge additional to the freight. It can happen. In a transport document, other than the freight, if you are having any charges, additional charges to the freight, yes. Additional charges to the freight, yes. It is allowed, right? But you have to have a stamp or some reference. Now, Article 27, clean transport document. A bank will only accept a clean transport document. A sentence underline කරලා තියාගන්න ඕන. Always, the bank will only accept a clean transport document. A clean transport document is one bearing no clause or notations expressly declaring a defective condition of the goods or the packaging. That is the only criteria for the clean bill of lading. A clean transport document is one bearing a no clause or notation expressly declaring a defective conditions of the goods or their packaging. The word clean need not appear on the transport document, even if a crate has a requirement for that transport document to be clean on board. Right. Now, for example, in this one, in the goods, what do you call this? Description of the good. Under description of the goods, it says oil barrels. Oil barrels, right? Oil barrels තමයි ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන්නේ. Oil clip. ඒක දාලා තියෙනවා On the BL, 4 oil barrels are leaking. 4 oil barrels are leaking. 4 oil barrels are leaking now. There's a defective condition of the goods. You got it? Right? Defective condition of the goods. May oil barrels leak වෙලා. හතරක් මේ oil barrels පටවලා තියෙනවා. අපි හිතමු 400 units of oil barrels. ඒකෙන් හතරක් leak වෙනවා. එතකොට මේ වගේ condition එකක් තියෙන BL එකක්, it is not a clean BL. Right? It is not a clean BL. This is a closed BL. එහෙම නැත්නම් අපි කියනවා dirty BL කියලා. Oil වැටලා මේක damage වෙලා dirty වෙලා නැහැ. But it's a dirty BL or closed BL එකක් තියෙන්නේ. ඉතින් අපි ගන්නෙ නැහැ. Right? Another example, 400 boxes of tools. 400 boxes of tools. Right? Making out of which 4 boxes damaged. 4 boxes damaged. මේ shipper දාලා තියෙන්නේ මේ class එකක්. මේක එයා නැවට ගන්නකොට shipping guy මේ නැවට ගන්නකොට මේක මේ හතරක් කැඩලා. එතන එයාට බෑ මේ 400 boxes. When you issue a bill of lading, you undertake that whatever the goods you received in good condition will be delivered to the other party in good condition, the same condition. The method of commercial invoice is 400 boxes of tools. Mera 400 boxes hambena. Hambunata me never to pattern balanote. In between, other than method had a coma boxes are like damage. Otherwise, the guy is responsible. Eh? The shipping guy is responsible. They can they add 4 boxes damage killer. Even the 4 boxes damage killer bit. And let the quarter take a clean BL name. Right? That is not a clean BL. And the word clean need not appear on a transport document. Another important thing. Good lamai clean onboard notation එක නැත්තම් අපි transport document එක අපි discrepant කියලා reject කරනවා. Even if a credit has a requirement for that transport document to be clean on board. Clean on board කියලා තිබ්බට clean කියන word එක මේක නැති වුණාට අපි we treat it as a clean BL. Clean BL. එහෙනම් මොකද්ද වෙන්න ඕනේ clean නොවෙන්න? Clean නොවෙන්න මොකද්ද වෙන්න ඕනේ? Clean නොවෙන්න මොකද්ද වෙන්න ඕනේ? කියවන්න ආටිකල් එක. ආටිකල් එකේ තියෙන උත්තරේ.
Declaring a defective condition.
Defective condition. Declaring a defective condition. If they have declared a defective condition, then it is not a clean. Unless otherwise, it's a clean transport document. Right? But the word clean is not necessary. ගොඩක් කට්ටිය බැංක්ස් වලින් සමහරලාට නොදන්න කමට ඒව රිජෙක්ට් කරනවා. මේ රිජෙක්ට් කරනවා මේක මේ ක්ලීන් ඔන් බෝඩ් එකක් නෙමෙයි කියලා. ඕනේ නැහැ. Right? Okay. Article 28 also, I'm not going to discuss it now. Let the insurance guy discuss this article with you when they are doing the insurance part with you. Right? There's another lecturer on insurance and a separate lecturer on supply chain management. Right? ඔය දෙකම ඔයගන්ට හරි ඉම්පෝටන්ට් වෙනවා. මොකද මම ඒ දෙන්නම පිටින් ගේන්නේ දෙන්නම බැංකර්ස්ලා නෙමෙයි. They are the authority, they are one of the authorities in their respective fields. Right? Then you can ask all your questions. All your questions. Right? දැන්ටත් ඔයගලගේ BA වල තියෙන questions, insurance documents වල තියෙන questions ඔය එකතු කරලා තියාගන්න. තියාගෙන ඉවරලා මාත් එක්ක ඉන්න වගේ හැකන පියාගෙන මුකුත් නැතුව ඉන්න එපා. කතා කරන්න. කතා කරලා questions clear කරගන්න. මොකද ඒ වගේ chance එකක් එන්නේ නැහනේ. මාත් එක්ක කතා කළොත් මට දෙන්න පුළුවන් knowledge එකෙන් අරයාගේ knowledge එකෙන් 75% විතරයි. Well, they are in the industry. Right? They are in the industry. ඒකයි මම ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ industry experts ළම ගේන්නේ. මේ ක්ලාස් එකට විතරයි මම ගේන්නේ උඩ. මොකද මට ඕනේ මෙතන මේ ළමයි හරියටම දේ දැනගන්න. Right? ඒ ඔයගොල්ලෝ අද ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ දැන් officers වල දැන් වැඩි trade guys ලා ඉන්නේ day to day operations වල companies වල import export companies වල ඇති ඔයගොල්ලන්ගේ issues logistic issues එතකොට insurance issues ඒ ඔක්කොම හදාගෙන කතා කරලා මේක වුණොත් මේක කොහොමද වෙන්නේ කියන එක ගොන්ට් අහගන්න. හරි? Okay. Then Article 29. Article 29. Extending the expiry date or last date for presentation. Extension of expiry date or the last date of presentation. Right? කියවන්න බාන Article 29 එක. කියවලා Article 36 එකටත් ගිහිල්ලා 29 A එකටත් ගිහිල්ලා ඒ ටික refer කරලා මොකද ඔළුවට ගන්න. කියවද Article 29 එක. Extension of expiry date or last date for presentation. If the expiry date of a credit or the last day for presentation falls on a day when the bank to which the presentation is to be made is closed for reason other than those referred to in Article 36. The expiry date or the last date for presentation, as the case may be, will be extended to the first following banking day. What is Article 36? Is post measure. A bank assumes no liability or responsibilities for the consequences arising out of interruption of business of acts of God. Right? Unless otherwise it is not under Article 36. If the expiry date or the last day for presentation falls on a day where the bank is closed on a public holiday, right? On a Sunday, if you say Sunday, then the expiry date will be extended to or extended by another 1 day, the first working day. Right? So expiry date is, or the latest presentation date falls on a Sunday. Monday, like in Sri Lanka, this coming Monday is a holiday, Poe day, right? It's a Poe day, third day. Third Poe day, the first banking day, fourth. Okay, tomorrow is second. Second is as per the LC, it is second. Now second, then you have to submit the documents on third. But third is a holiday again. Third is also a holiday. Then the banks will be opening only on fourth. So we'll take it as fourth. So if they submit the documents on fourth, we'll treat it as a compliant document. No discrepancies. Is it clear?
Yes.
Clear than that. But unless otherwise, Article 36 Article 36 apply or not, acts of God beyond our control. If there's floods due to a flood situation or tsunami situation or COVID-19, COVID-19 නම් අපි ඩික්ලෙයාර් කරනවානේ. COVID-19 නම් අපි ඩික්ලෙයාර් කරලා තියෙන මේ දවස්වල වහලා කර්ෆියු කියලා. එහෙම නැතුව අපි හිතමු beyond our control ගියා කියලා ඔයගලන්ගේ බැංක් එකේ තියෙන හරියට විතරක් ගම් වතුර ගන්නයි කියලා. දවස් දෙකක් හෝ තුනක්. එතකොට second, third, fourth, fifth කියන එක නෑ. අපිට කියන්න පුළුවන් reason එකක් හිටිට මේකයි කියලා. That's beyond our control. Bank has no liabilities. You got it?
Yes.
එන්නකෝ. ඕදේ නැද්ද? එහෙම නැත්නම් මාත් එක්ක ආගිය කරන්න තියනවද? Right. ඒක මේ ඔක්කොම ඕන වෙනවා මේ මේකට මොනවටද ඒක කියන්නේ මේ document checking වලට මේක ඕන වෙනවා. හරිද? Article Article 29 එකේ අපි හිතමු දැන් මේක තිබුණා කියලා. Latest shipment date. දැන් අපි මේක latest shipment date තිබ්බා. expiry එක no issue, one day එහා පැත්තට දාන්න පුළුවන්. latest shipment date එක තියෙනවා second වල. So can we take third or fourth as the latest shipment date? Third is also a holiday. So can we take fourth as the latest? Can we extend it to fourth? If you have done the actual shipment on fourth, are we going to quote it as a discrepancy or not? Shipment. Right? Better instances දෙකක්. අපි ගත්තොත් second Sunday, third Monday, Wednesday. එහෙම තියෙද්දී expiry
බෝඩ් එක පේන්නේ බෝඩ් එක පේනවා සර්.
දැන් පේනවද?
now it's okay.
Now it's okay. Expiry එක තියෙන්නේ make an expiry again. Expired on second Sunday. Third Monday, oh yeah. Expiry can be extended to other. Fourth, eh? Fourth Tuesday. Fourth Tuesday is the expiry, right? Then last date for presentation. Last day for presentation. Last day for presentation can be extended to fourth Tuesday. Last day for presentation is also can be extended to fourth Tuesday, as per the article 29. Then last date for shipment. Last date for shipment. The make how the may may expiry fourth fourth submit කළ තියෙන documents අපි එක accept කරනවද නැද්ද? accept කරනවද නැද්ද? Penny?
accept කරන්න පුළුවන් sir. accept කරන්න පුළුවන්.
කරන්න පුළුවන්. Second last date for presentation. Fourth Tuesday.
Can accept.
Huh?
Can accept.
Can accept. Last date for shipment. Fourth Tuesday. Because Sunday, Monday, where? Fourth Tuesday. Last date for shipment. Is it correct?
Can't.
Huh?
Can't.
Wrong. Yeah, can't accept.
Why? Can't accept it. Why? Why?
Unless of course presentation period is 1 day. එතකොට overlap වෙනවා නේද sir?
නෑ. overlap වෙන්නේ නැහැ. Presentation period එක උනත් දැන් අපිට 2 days වලින් යන්න පුළුවන් නේ.
Article 29C.
Latest shipment date එක. හරි එහෙමනම් මම මෙහෙම කිව්වොත් ඒක ගන්නවා. Last date for shipment එකක් තිබුණේ second Sunday මෙයා ship කරලා තියෙන්නේ third Monday. Third Monday කරලා තියෙන්නේ. මුතර documents එක දෙන්න පුළුවන් නේ 4 වෙනිදාට. දැන් හරියද? දැන් අතන මේක accepted then. Last date for shipment was second Sunday. Actual date of shipment. Actual date of shipment. Actual date of shipment, third Monday. Is it correct?
No sir.
No. The reason?
Article C states no, that the latest shipment cannot be. Article C.
Sorry, yes. But I wouldn't. Can what? එක්කෙනට බයිද හිතන්න. Last date for shipment is at any given time, date of shipment cannot be extended. The reason is all 365 days, the shipment will be done, whether it's FOIA or public holiday or not, right? Even on Christmas Day or Sinhalese New Year Day, Vesak Day, Boson Day, Asala Day, everything, right? Shipments, the harbor or the port is working, and nowhere in the world they allow extending the shipment date. Shipment date cannot be extended. All the other two can be extended as per the Article 29 for the next or the immediate working day. Immediate working day, but not the shipment date. Shipment dates cannot be extended. Right? Okay. I think enough for today. Now we have discussed up to 29. Now up to 30. The next article we have to discuss is Article 30.
So excuse me, one question.
Yeah. Tell me.
Now when you say the latest date of shipment,
yeah,
do we have to mention that on board date? Oh, no, because now BL can issue the earlier before the selling. Before the selling, BL can issue.
Yeah. Onboard dating, onboard date.
In that case,
onboard date should be before the last date of shipment.
Shipment, yeah. Now we'll say if there's no mention onboard date, there's a BL issued date.
Okay.
In that case, how can we?
In that case, how are we going to do it? If there no mentioning about the onboard date, then what is the date we are taking for document checking?
BL issue date.
BL issuance date. BL issuance date, we take it.
Okay.
Right?
Yes, sir.
BL issuance date is the one. Correct? Okay. Okay, then we'll meet next week. You are going to have the election also, no? We will be meeting under new government. So every day, if we have time, I'm going to discuss these articles with you now. 38 කරලා තියෙන අපි. මේ discussion එක හරි important. Right? මේක තමයි උගන්ට ඕනම කරන එක document checkers ලා හැටියට අනික trade ඉගෙන ගන්න තියෙන හොඳම දේ මේක. මේවෙන් තමයි questions අපි හදන්නේ. Right? Okay. මම තව document තව මේ ඔයගලන්ට මේව බලන්න පුළුවන් කොහොමද මේ මට ඒක අමතකුණා මේ you can see these presentations only at the class day. Or before that you can't see the presentation. Sorry.
One day before the class, normally the presentation are loaded. Sites are loaded. Yeah.
So that time you can check the system and see the presentation.
Yes, we can see.
Right. Okay. Good. මම දන්නේ ඒක කොහොමද කරන්නේ කියලා. උගන්ට තව assignments set එකක් මම දෙනවා. මේක ඒකට මාක්ස් දෙන්නව නෙමෙයි. නමුත් හැබැයි උගන්ට වැඩ කරන්න හොඳයි. ඒකත් ඔයගොල්ලෝ කරලා බලන්න. කරලා මට මේ වගේම පුළුවන් තරම් දෙන්න. මේ ටික මම බලලා දෙන්නම් උගන්ට. Right? Okay.